I'm actually changing the topic a little bit. I was kind of surprised when I saw the first program, and Pure Group had me on for 2 talks instead of 1. And the second one was something I really don't know anything about. Really. I mean, it's been 8.5 years since I've been active on a day-to-day basis with the California strawberry industry, and even then I was only indirectly involved in the labor and picking, packing situation. I mean, obviously I was in the field a lot. We worked very closely with the growers there. But so I'm taking the liberty here of talking about a couple of other things. First of all, I had a few more things I wanted to cover about fertilizing day-neutral strawberries, and it has to do with in-ground systems. Just some observations that I've made over the years that I think reinforce really what the 2 other Toms have already spoken about. You know, we've heard this already. These are the varieties that are under consideration, and Albion is listed first, not only because it's alphabetically, but it is the one that's working the best. It's interesting, Albion is not what's working best in California, and I think it's climatic. Albion goes through a pretty rough period in the springtime of green seedy tips. When we have our cool night temperatures and those plants are putting out a lot of fruit. The Albions I've seen in Ontario and in Washington State, I've been to Alf's farm, it's a great operation. You know, they look better, they're more uniform color, they smell better than the Albions typically. I mean, Albion's a great variety, don't get me wrong, in California it can be, but it goes in and out of good periods and bad periods. Whereas what I've seen in other places, interestingly enough, it's been very consistent quality in these other areas. Monterey is now coming on as an important variety in the Watsonville-Salinas district, to be on the coastal area. It has very nice shaped fruit. Monterey and San Andreas are very good at producing uniform, more Driscoll type heart-shaped fruit. And the flavor on Monterey is pretty good under our conditions on the coast there in the Watsonville area. I think it's kind of got the overall package for that zone. San Andreas is an earlier variety, a little bit earlier, so it's come into favor in Santa Maria. Santa Maria has gone away from short day Southern California type varieties to a great extent. They're now growing a lot of day neutrals, and they can get a jump in the production in the springtime while using the San Andreas variety compared to the Albion. And so they're working with the Albion a lot down there. Portola has a niche as a variety that can be planted maybe in a late spring, early summer situation. If you are growing short day variety, say in Santa Maria, you can take out the short day variety and drop in a Portola and double crop in the field. That's where we've seen Portola used in California anyway, it seems like. The other thing about San Andreas is that it's been used quite a bit in Ventura County, Oxnard area, as a winter planted variety. It has, you know, because it's a day neutral, it comes in from the nursery ready to flower, and it goes into early production. It does tend to kind of, you know, it gets a point later in the season where it just kind of stops growing and loads up with too much fruit. The plant isn't there, so it's not a great variety to end up the season with a processing yield. But the San Andreas can get some very good early production in Southern California. So it's kind of interesting how these varieties have found their niches up and down the coast in California. Now, but you know, these varieties do tend to be pretty widely adapted to different climates, soils, pH. You know, we've already talked about the raised bed plasticulture system. I wasn't really sure how much of that was being done up here, but I think that's very interesting how it's being adopted pretty aggressively now. And of course, this is obvious, you know, it's a different kind of plant. I mean, you're planting, a lot of you planting in the springtime, you're trying to grow a plant and also produce a crop at the same time. And that plant is trying to initiate the future crop and at the same time it's ripening the current crop. I mean, it's a real interesting type of plant in that respect. So it makes sense that you're going to fertilize it differently than you would a June bearer. And you know, you're producing fruit at a time of year when there's less rainfall, temperatures are higher. So I think that's why there's been so much talk about irrigation, fertigation systems, really paying attention to the drip irrigation system and the fertility of the plant and the timing of the fertility. So that gets into my thinking here. I still believe you need to correct as many of your soil nutrient problems before you bed up. You know, that's the best way to treat any nutrient deficiencies prior to bedding up. And then we're very aware of the effect of water quality on nutrition in California, because we do have issues of high mineral content and high salt levels in the water down there. I mean, it's amazing when you do the math. If you've got a nitrate problem in the well, using well water, it can make a substantial contribution to the overall nitrogen fertility, contribution of nitrogen supply. Because, you know, with day neutrals, in a plasticulture system, the bulk of the water is now coming from, you know, your water supply, and if it's well water and it's got nitrates, you've got to be aware of the nitrates in the water and what it's contributing. And then we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have these issues with calcium and magnesium that may require us to acidify water supplies using something like sulfuric acid. Otherwise, we'll precipitate out a lot of the nutrients that we're trying to apply. And phosphorus is a great example. You know, I remember doing a study, we were trying to put phosphorus on foliar on strawberry plant that showed obvious phosphorus deficiency symptoms. And it worked fine if we mixed up our solution in the lab before we went out to the field. But every time we tried to use the well water on the field to correct the phosphorus, it didn't work. Well, duh. The phosphorus, you could see it on the leaves. It was precipitating out on the leaf. And you mix it up in the well water, and all the calcium and magnesium was reacting with phosphorus and precipitating it out. So it never did any good. It just sat there like a spray residue on the surface of the leaf. So that was a big lesson for me, interactions with well water. So I think that, you know, these nutrients need to be addressed not only individually, but in the context of other elements that you have. And, you know, I've seen this where in San Benito County, California, just east of the Watsonville area, very high levels of boron in groundwater to the point where it doesn't matter how much calcium you try to give the plant, it's not going to take it out because boron's inhibiting the uptake of calcium. You know, the crinkle leaf syndrome and folded tips on strawberries that were growing in ground that should have been tested as having plenty of calcium. The plant just wasn't able to take it out because of the boron in the water supply. Across the road, they had water coming from the water district pipeline project that was fine, but that particular field was using groundwater. So you got to be aware of that. We've seen this in our substrate studies where high levels of potassium or sodium can also impact calcium uptake, because some of the early batches of core that we were using in our substrate work came in with very high levels of potassium and sodium and chloride. And we had classic calcium deficiency symptoms, even though we were fertigating with plenty of calcium. In the Watsonville Salinas area, on some of the heavier grounds, like along the Poplar River Valley, we can see magnesium. As we're talking about cation exchange capacity and the makeup of cation exchanges, where magnesium can be twice 2 to 3 times the calcium on cation exchange. It's kind of reverse of what you normally see. Whereas in Whatcom County, at least in the raspberry fields I've been working with the last few years, we can see the reverse in some of those sandy soils there in Whatcom County, where the ratio of calcium and magnesium is very high. There's magnesium deficiency symptoms showing up on the plants, the raspberries, early, and some varieties early in the season. So the ratios can be as significant as the levels. So just to sum up, well, here's something else that I mentioned earlier. Well, if we can optimize early growth on day neutrals, we have better results. And the conventional thinking is that strawberries don't really take up nitrogen for the first 2 or 3 months after planting in California. And that conventional thinking has been supported by studies that, of course, nobody goes out in the field until the end of January to measure. So how do they know? My own experience is that nitrogen applications in fall planted strawberries, fresh dug plants, have been very beneficial on the early yield of strawberries in California, particularly you can see it in the plants that you get better growth by late January to August, and the first half yields in particular are increased where we've provided adequate nitrogen and optimized growing conditions. So April through June in particular, we see increased yields. So to me, it seems like that could translate to something useful here, that if you optimize the early growth on the day neutrals, you can optimize at least your early first year production. So that's just something I wanted to pass along. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover on the soil-based systems. Just repeating what I just said. If we can optimize early growth, I think we can optimize your first year production. Early frequent feeding, develop stronger root system, better growth. You have a limited time to develop the plant. Tom has talked about deep blossoming. Yes, I agree with that. Tom Bauman, that is, talked about deep blossoming on the spring planted day neutrals. I think that's important to get good establishment. Whatever we can do to build a stronger plant early will pay off that first year. And it's obvious that, as Alf just talked about, day neutrals can be an important part of your fresh market operation. And I've seen this with Rudy Heumann in Ontario, and Alf's talking about it. They really do seem to complement the June bearing varieties. They give you a product a desirable product over a much longer period. So you have a chance for more local sales. And, people, it's a great way to bring them in. If you've got strawberries, they like them. And I've heard this from growers in Michigan and wherever. If they've got day neutrals there in the mix, it seems to really help bring the customers in. Because let's face it, it's a year-round crop. You look at the shipments of strawberries out of Mexico in the winter months now being right there equal to Florida. So you've got this doubling of supply now in winter months. The potential's there for 1 million trays of strawberries a week or more in those winter months. And it's become a commodity that you can expect to find at any time of the year. So I think you can sell it any time of the year. And day neutrals are a big part of what making it happen. So, okay, so let me just tell you a story to wrap up. It really has more to do with brand than it does with packaging, but it involved packaging. That's how this happened. In 1987, I started at Driscoll's. All the strawberries were being packed into the 12-pint trays, face pack. So, the tray weighed as much as 13, 14 pounds, and it was all nice. Fruit on the top of the tray was all nicely aligned. And what they were doing, the emphasis on marketing was to the buyer, the chain store buyer, or to the wholesale market. A lot of strawberries in 1987 were still going through wholesale markets, particularly at Driscoll's. I had people in every market around in the major cities of the United States that they were selling to on an exclusive basis. And that was their customer. The consumer was not the customer in 1987. But consumer had figured out that there was something better with Driscoll berries, and so some people were looking for them in the market. And there were guys in the grocery stores that were making that happen by putting Driscoll trays out as a display item. There was one, I've heard this from a colleague of mine at Driscoll's, that said that he went to a store and the grocer, this would have been in the 70s, late 70s, was turning all the berries. So the points would be to show a seedy tip. The variety Driscoll's was growing in the 1970s and early 80s had a seedy tip on it. And the guy says, "What are you doing that for?" You want to hide that, you know. And the guy says, "Well, my customers know that. That's a good tasting berry. They see that seedy tip." And that's how they figured it out, you know. Driscoll's wasn't doing anything to help them understand that. You know, the customer themselves had figured it out. Well, it's pretty obvious that, you know, if you could get the brand in the hands of the consumers, that would be very powerful. So in the early 90s, the marketing people at Driscoll's introduced the clamshell packaging. So now you had the Driscoll name on the product that was going home with the consumer. So you could tie the brand to the satisfaction, right? Hopefully. And you had a clear container now, so you could show off your product. You weren't afraid to put it in a package the consumer could pick up, turn it upside down. They all did. Look at the bottom. They didn't want to see any green berries hidden in the bottom. Like, you know, a lot of, let's face it, a lot of the little green mesh baskets had green berries in the bottom, the first layer. A lot of times those little underripe green berries. So anyway, that, and it didn't come easy. I mean, the grocery stores were slow to change in particular. But over time, they began to realize, wow, this was great. Because, you know, when I in the late 80s, when I used to go back east on inspection trips with Driscoll's, and we'd go into the grocery store, and we'd say, "Well, where's your produce department manager?" "Oh, he's in the back working strawberries." Here's this high-priced labor back there taking apart that pint tray of strawberries so they could get an extra 1 or 2 pints out of it because of that face pack. And tell me what, it dawned on him, wow, if I get a clamshell tray, all I got to do is set up the fruit. I don't have to rework it. I don't have to do anything. So they cut their labor costs, and that's what sold it to the grocery stores. But in the process, they gave everybody in California an opportunity to put their own name on the package and put it in front of the consumer. And then, you know, like during halftime, we had that nice video from Giant. I mean, Giant was just another one of those players sending berries in bulk packaging to the stores, and nobody knew if they were eating Giant berries or Driscoll's or Well-Picked, whatever. Now everybody knows. So that's been quite a change that's happened over a relatively short period of time in California. And that's, you know, it's funny how you start out with one thing and ends up with another. So just wanted to share that with you. Yeah?
Is the majority of fruit grown by Driscoll, is it proprietary varieties? Or
Yeah, virtually 100% is proprietary varieties. And that, they had worked, you know, they started that breeding work back in 1944. And they had developed their own line of varieties. You know, their first big variety was a variety called Goldsmith. That was named in honor of the breeder that developed. He died the year it was just being introduced. And this other one, the patented variety called Goldsmith in his honor. And it was one of the first product differentiation points for that company. That was in the 1960s, I think it was, early 60s. And then they introduced a variety called Heidi in the 70s that further differentiated them from the, because everybody else was growing University of California public varieties in those days. So it was really like a two-tier system, you know. And yeah. But they clung to that proprietary model. Even today, competition is much better, obviously. Those UC varieties have gotten a lot better. Day neutrals. Yes, Tom?
Well, this is a little off topic, but as long as you're there, do you know what's going on with the California UC Davis breeding program?
Boy, you know.
Didn't you hear Tom speak on NPR about this?
I'm dumping on the table with that one.
Yeah.
Now that the lawsuits are flying both directions.
Yeah, are they going to actually keep the program going?
They say they are. The university is saying, yes, we're going. I mean, they've advertised for the position, you know, and you know, you never know exactly how it's going to be worded in terms of what their job responsibilities are, that sort of thing. But they do intend to rehire and fill that position.
Hey Tom, just like, could you give a 30-second in case anyone doesn't know what that means, what Tom's question meant? Could you just explain?
Yes. Well, Doug Shaw and Kirk Larson have been running the program for quite a few years now. Decided they wanted to start a private program, working with some fairly, I don't even know their names, but they're good-sized shipper operations. Anyway, and originally they wanted to take their material, their plant material with them to start a program. The university said, no, we own the material, you can't have it. And there was this big concern by the industry were they going to keep the program going after Doug and Kirk left? Would they manage to take care of these plants properly? You know, they're going to keep this, we're going to lose a lot of important germplasm. All that sort of stuff was going on. So to kind of bring things to a point, the Strawberry Commission filed a lawsuit against the University of California over this. Just you know, they want to make sure that they've been, you know, investing in this program for many, many years through a $350,000 a year contribution to the program.
Matt, you gonna come up with that for us this year?
Yeah, pretty big numbers. And of course, the university had every reason really to keep it going if you think about it. They were making millions of dollars on royalties off of these varieties. And you're only as good as your last variety, you know. Anyway, there's been all this going back and forth, and then now in the last month or so, there's been a lawsuit filed by the university against the Strawberry Commission, trying to get this thing finished up. So that's all I know. That's all I care to know.
But I mean, I think the bottom line is the breeders are leaving, and they'll be done at the end of the year. The germplasm appears to be staying.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to hire a new breeder.
Yeah, because they did post it, so I'm.
Well, they did interview.
Oh, they've actually interviewed.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you go? By the way, I'm doing my notice. No. I wouldn't leave here. It's more fun. That's a nightmare down there.
Oh, yeah. This is much more fun up here. Why do you think I went to go to Washington in the summer and breed raspberries? I don't know if you know that or not, but I do that for Driscoll's, but it's working with the neighbors in Whatcom County. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun working with them.
There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome.